talk a lot about the cloud, about, wireless data and instant global connection.
Right.
We have this mental picture of our data just floating through the air, maybe bouncing off a satellite.
Yeah, that's the common image.
What the physical truth of the global internet, the thing that actually holds it all together is, well, it's much quieter and much wetter.
It's under the waves.
Hi, and welcome to Brain Binge, the show where we dive way too deep into the weird side of reality. Whether you're trying to fall asleep, stuck on a late-night drive, studying, or cleaning, thanks for hanging out with us.
Tonight we're talking about undersea cables.
What they are, how they work, how they break, and the surprisingly intense process of putting them back together.
That's right. If you were to look at a map of global data flow, it wouldn't be in the sky. It's almost all moving through these physical threads of glass resting on the ocean floor.
Your video call to another continent, your online gaming, billions in financial transactions, all of it depends on a physical cable that has to survive crushing pressure and total darkness.
And that's our deep dive today. At its core, an undersea cable is just a very, very well-protected fiber optic system.
Laid on or sometimes under the seafloor.
Exactly. And it's the single most critical piece of infrastructure we have for cross-border data.
And they matter because, well, without them, our modern idea of the internet just wouldn't exist, not at this scale.
Not at all. They give us two things that nothing else really can, at least not for this purpose.
Okay.
Massive, massive data capacity and incredibly low delay. Low latency.
That's the key term, latency.
It is. And that combination makes them the only real option for the heavy lifting. Satellites are vital, of course, but for different things. Remote areas, planes, filling in gaps.
But not for streaming a 4K movie to millions of people at once.
Precisely. For that, you need the cable.
So today we're going to trace this whole journey from this almost impossible Victorian-era dream to the anatomy of the cables themselves, why they fail, and what it takes to fix them out in the middle of the ocean.
It's quite a story.
To really get it, we have to go back. Way back. Over 150 years.
Back to the telegraph.
Yeah, as soon as people figured out you could send messages down a wire, the next logical thought was, can we send this wire across the sea?
The commercial and, geopolitical implications were enormous.
Imagine being able to send a message across the English Channel or even the Atlantic in minutes instead of weeks.
It was a complete paradigm shift. But the dream was way ahead of the reality.
How so?
Well, the early experiments they were a disaster. The wires would corrode almost instantly. Salt water and electricity do not mix well without protection.
So the challenge wasn't the wire itself, but the insulation.
That was the whole game. Finding something that could survive the pressure, the cold, the salt for years.
And they found something. What was the material that finally cracked the code?
It was a material called gutta percha.
Gutta percha.
Yeah, it's a natural latex from a tree, kind of like rubber.
But
very different in one key way. It's incredibly resistant to seawater. It doesn't degrade. And it stays flexible under the immense pressure of the deep ocean. It was the perfect material for the job.
So once they had that, the idea of an underwater cable went from an inventor's fantasy to a real engineering project.
It became an industrial challenge, not a theoretical one. All of a sudden, you could actually build it.
And if you look at that timeline, you see this slow, painful progress.
Oh, absolutely. There were so many failures, cables that snapped during laying, cables that just went dead after a day.
But they kept at it. Eventually, they crossed the channel.
And then, after some just spectacular failures, they finally laid the first successful transatlantic telegraph cable in 1866.
A triumph of what? Victorian engineering and sheer stubbornness?
And a lot of money. But it worked. And that system, copper wires carrying electrical signals, dominated for the next 100 years or so.
They even got voice calls working with the first telephone cables in the 1950s.
They did. But then came the real revolution.
Fiber optics.
Fiber optics, and just as importantly, optical amplification. That shift in the late 20th century just changed everything. The capacity went up by orders of magnitude.
And the latency went down.
Dramatically.
Yeah.
And that's what created the backbone for the internet we know today. You just can't do what we do now on copper. The physics doesn't work.
So, okay, let's unpack that. Let's get into the mechanics of how light and glass actually carry, a video of a cat across an ocean.
It starts with encoding. All our data is just ones and zeros, right?
Right.
So you take that digital information and you encode it into incredibly rapid pulses of light. On, off, billions of times a second.
And those light pulses travel through these optical fibers.
And ultra pure glass fibers, yeah. Each one is thinner than a human hair. We are literally flashing light signals across the bottom of the Atlantic.
It sounds so simple when you put it like that. But how do you scale it? How does one tiny hair of glass carry so much information?
That's where the real magic is. It's a technique called multiplexing.
Multiplexing.
Specifically for these systems, it's called wavelength division multiplexing, or WDM.
Okay, WDM. Break that down for us.
Absolutely. Right. Think about a single glass fiber as a highway. Without WDM, you have one lane carrying one stream of traffic.
One car at a time.
Exactly. With WDM, you can send different wavelengths, which are essentially just different colors of light, down that exact same fiber at the same time.
Wait, so you can have a red light pulse, a green light pulse, and a blue light pulse all traveling together without interfering with each other.
And dozens, sometimes hundreds of other distinct colors or wavelengths. They're all in the infrared spectrum, so we can't see them, but it's the same principle.
So it's like turning that one-lane highway into a 100-lane superhighway.
That is the perfect analogy. And on the other end, a device separates all those colors back out into their individual data streams. It's an incredible multiplication of capacity.
And that's how a single cable can carry terabits of data per second.
It's the fundamental reason fiber is so dominant.
And it all comes back to latency. The speed of light through glass, a direct path along the seabed. It's just physically faster than beaming a signal up to a satellite and back down.
You can't cheat the speed of light, and the path is just so much shorter.
But that glass, that delicate hair-thin strand of glass, it needs protection, a lot of protection.
An immense amount. If that fiber gets even a microscopic crack, or if water gets in or gets crushed, the signal is gone.
Which brings us to the cable's anatomy. It's not just a glass thread.
Oh, not at all.
Yeah.
The actual glass fibers are just the tiny core. The rest of the cable, which can be as thick as a fire hose, is all about survival.
So walk us through the layers. What's wrapped around that core?
Okay, so right around the fibers themselves, you have a water-blocking compound. It's often like a petroleum jelly.
To stop any moisture that might get through the outer layers.
Precisely. Then you get polymer sheaths, and then the really important part for handling, the strength members.
Strength members.
These are usually strands of high-tensile steel. Their only job is to take the strain. When you're laying or recovering miles of this cable, the tension is enormous. These steel strands ensure the glass core itself is never stretched.
So the glass just sort of floats inside the steel cage, protected from being pulled apart.
In essence, yes. And then outside of that, you have more layers to resist abrasion from rubbing on rocks, and, of course, the crushing face of all that water.
But you mentioned something else before, conductive elements. What are those for? They're not for data.
That's a key piece of the puzzle. Woven into this structure, you'll often have a copper tube or other conductors.
And their job is?
Power. They carry the electricity needed to run equipment along the route.
Equipment on the ocean floor. We'll get to that. But first, this armor. Is it the same thickness all the way across an entire ocean?
No. And this is a critical part of the design. The armoring changes drastically depending on the risk.
So deep ocean versus shallow water.
Exactly. Out in the deep abyssal plains, miles down, the cable is actually relatively thin. It's called lightweight armor. There's not much down there to interfere with it.
But near the coast?
Near the shore. In water less than, say, 1,000 meters deep, the cable is a monster. It'll have double, sometimes triple layers of heavy steel wire armor wrapped around it.
Why so much more protection closer to land?
Because that's where the people are. That's where the ships are.
That's where the anchors are.
That's where the anchors and the fishing trawlers are. The single greatest threat to the internet is a ship's anchor dragging along the seabed.
So we've got this incredibly protected cable carrying pulses of light, but you mentioned that light fades. Even in ultra-pure glass, it's not going to make it thousands of kilometers across the Atlantic on its own.
No, it's a process called attenuation. The signal just gets weaker and weaker until it's just noise.
So you need to boost it along the way.
You do. You need repeaters. They're also called optical amplifiers.
And these are boxes that sit on the ocean floor.
They're highly engineered sealed canisters that are spliced into the cable every 50 to 100 kilometers or so.
And their job is just to take that fading light signal, boost it back up to full strength, and send it on its way?
Essentially, yes. They regenerate the signal to keep it clean and strong all the way to the other side.
What's fascinating here is these sealed units require power, which leads to a surprising fact about deep-sea power infrastructure.
Right. They need constant, reliable electricity. And they're sitting at the bottom of the ocean, miles from anywhere. You can't just run an extension cord.
So where does the power come from?
It comes from the shore. from those conductive elements we talked about inside the cable itself.
You're saying they send electricity down the same cable system that's carrying the data?
That's exactly it. The landing stations on each end of the cable act as giant power plants. They pump extremely high voltage direct current, or DC, down the line.
How high are we talking?
It could be anywhere from 5,000 to sometimes even 15,000 volts.
15,000 volts running along the seabed? That's a lot.
It's an immense amount of power, and it has to be DC, direct current.
Why not AC like we have in our houses?
Over these incredible distances, DC is just way more efficient. AC power would lose a huge amount of energy due to effects in the cable. DC minimizes those losses, making it the only practical way to power a whole chain of these repeaters across an ocean.
So the landing stations are not just where the data comes ashore, they're also the power stations for the entire system.
And the monitoring stations, they are the nerve center.
What are they monitoring?
Everything. They're watching the optical signal, looking for errors, but they're also constantly tracking the electrical behavior.
Like the voltage and current.
Exactly. If they see a slight change in resistance, a small drop in voltage, that could be an early warning.
A sign of a problem before the whole thing fails.
It could mean a tiny breach in the armor,
Yeah.
maybe water starting to get in. It allows them to detect anomalies long before a catastrophic break. It's a vital part of keeping the system stable.
Okay, so that's the cable itself. But when we look at a global map, it's not just a bunch of straight lines from one continent to another. It's more like a web.
It is. A single system is rarely just point A to point B. It's not efficient.
So how do they serve multiple locations with one main cable?
They use something called a branching unit.
A branching unit.
Think of it like an underwater junction box or T-intersection. It's a device spliced into the main high-capacity trunk line that lets you split off a smaller spur.
So you can run one massive cable across the Atlantic and then use a branching unit to send one spur to Ireland, one to France, one to Spain.
Exactly. It lets you serve multiple destinations without having to lay 3 separate, incredibly expensive transatlantic cables. It's all about optimizing the infrastructure.
And all of those trunks and spurs, they eventually have to come ashore somewhere.
At a landing station.
And that's more than just a hut on the beach.
Oh, much more. A landing station is a highly secure, critical facility. It's where the subsea cable connects to the terrestrial network.
It's where the light gets turned back into regular data.
It's where the optical equipment is, where the monitoring happens, and crucially, where that massive power feeding equipment lives. They're hardened assets with multiple backup power systems and intense security.
But the data's journey doesn't end at the beach, right? The landing station might be in a small coastal town, but the users are in big cities inland.
Right, and that brings up the concept of backhaul.
Backhaul.
Backhaul is the terrestrial fiber rope that carries all that international traffic from the landing station inland to the major data centers and internet hubs in cities like London or New York or Frankfurt.
And that backhaul path is just as important as the undersea one.
Absolutely essential. If the backhaul gets cut by, say, a construction crew digging in the wrong place, that multi-billion-dollar subsea cable is effectively useless until it's fixed. The data has nowhere to go.
All of this, the branching units, the multiple landing sites, it points to one core idea in network design.
Resilience
Ma'ams.
and redundancy.
You can never, ever rely on just one path.
Never. Because things break. So resilience is achieved in layers. You have multiple independent cable systems. You have them land at diverse locations, so a single hurricane doesn't take them all out.
And you have different backhaul routes inland.
Exactly. If one cable is cut, the traffic automatically and almost instantly shifts to an alternate path.
But you've said this resilience is uneven. What does that mean?
It means that the internet is not equally resilient for everyone. It's a harsh economic reality.
So a place like New York or London has tons of cables, tons of options.
Dozens of them. If one or even 2 cables serving that region fail, most users would never even notice. The traffic just shuffles around.
But for other places,
For many island nations or developing countries or places constrained by geography, they might only have 1 or 2 cables connecting them to the rest of the world.
so for them, a single anchor strike isn't an inconvenience, it's a national incident.
It can be a major economic and social disruption. Their connection to the world becomes slow, congested, or in a worst-case scenario, it could be cut off entirely until a repair is made. That unevenness is a huge geopolitical issue.
So if you're going to spend $1 billion to build one of these new systems, how do you even begin? How do you decide where to put it?
The planning is an immense multi-year process. It starts with endpoints and capacity goals.
But then you have to figure out the exact path on the seabed.
And for that, you need seabed surveys.
So you send a ship out to map the ocean floor.
A specialized survey ship, yeah. They use high-resolution sonar to perform what's called bathymetry.
Bathymetry.
Detailed seafloor mapping. They're looking for any potential hazard.
Like what? What are they trying to avoid?
Steep underwater cliffs that might cause landslides.
Mm-hmm.
Rocky, abrasive terrain that could wear down the cable over 25 years. Unstable sediment.
And they're also looking for human activity.
Oh yeah. They're mapping existing pipelines, other cables, major shipping anchorages, and fishing grounds. The goal is to find the safest, most stable path possible. The accuracy is down to a few meters.
Okay, so the ride is planned. Then comes the main event. Laying the cable.
With a cable-laying ship, which is basically a giant floating factory.
I've seen pictures of these. The cable is in these huge coils in the hull.
In massive tanks, yeah. And the deployment itself is an exercise in pure physics. It's all about controlled tension.
Why is the tension so critical?
Well, if the tension is too high, you could stretch the fibers or even snap the cable.
And if it's too low?
You get slack. The cable could pile up on itself on the bottom or form loops, which are just begging to be snagged by a fishing net later on.
So the ship moves along the route, slowly paying at the cable, keeping that tension perfect.
Exactly. In the deep ocean, it just rests gently on the seabed. But as you get closer to shore, into that danger zone,
it needs more protection.
That's when they have to bury it.
This brings us right back to that near-shore danger zone. The place where the deep, quiet ocean meets our noisy, busy world.
That's where almost all the problems happen. The deep sea is actually a pretty stable environment. It's the shallow water that's the headache.
So the scary part isn't the deep ocean, it's the shallow water humans use every day.
100%. The deep is dark and quiet. The shallows, anything less than 1,000 meters, are crowded.
With what?
Container ships anchoring, fishing trawlers dragging heavy gear, dredgers deepening ports, coastal construction, all the messy parts of human maritime activity.
And that's why the cable needs to be buried there. How do they actually do that?
The main method is to use a specialized sea plow.
A plow, like for farming?
A bit like that, yeah, but on a massive scale. It's towed behind the ship, and it cuts a trench into the seabed. The cable is fed down and laid directly into that trench as it's being cut.
And the sediment just falls back on top of it.
Right. Another method, especially in softer ground, is water jetting. A remotely operated vehicle, an ROV, uses high-pressure jets of water to liquefy the sediment.
Creating a sort of liquid trench that the cable can sink into.
Exactly. Then the sediment settles, and the cable is safely buried a meter or so beneath the surface.
But that's not a permanent solution, is it?
It's not. And this is a huge operational challenge.
Why?
Because the ocean is always moving. Strong currents, big storms, natural sediment shifts.
Yeah.
Over time, they can erode the seabed and re-expose a previously buried cable.
And suddenly it's right back in that high-risk zone.
Right back where an anchor can snag it.
So if we look at what actually breaks these things, what's at the top of the list?
The data is overwhelmingly clear. It's not spies or sharks.
It's us.
It's routine maritime activity. Number 1 is dragged anchors. Number 2 is fishing gear, especially heavy bottom trawling equipment.
And other causes?
You have some, sure. Abrasion on rocks over many years, damage during other construction projects. And then you have the rare but catastrophic natural events.
Earthquakes.
Earthquakes that trigger huge underwater landslides, which are called turbidity currents.
And a landslide like that can just shear through a cable.
It can take out multiple cables at once over a huge area. It's a low probability, high impact event.
So the inevitable happens, a cable goes dark. How in the world do you find a tiny break on a cable that's thousands of kilometers long and 2 miles deep?
It's a really cool process of remote diagnostics. It starts with the monitoring at the landing station. They see the signal just vanish.
It's a total failure.
Or sometimes it's not a hard break. Sometimes it's a slow degradation. The error rate starts creeping up, which might mean water's getting in somewhere.
So they know there's a problem. How do they pinpoint the location?
They use a technique that is basically a form of radar, but with light. It's called optical time-domain reflectometry, OTDR.
Okay.
They send a very specific, powerful pulse of light down the fiber from the shore.
And they wait for it to bounce back.
Exactly. When that light pulse hits the break, the point where the glass is shattered, a portion of the light reflects back to the station.
And because they know the speed of light in the glass, they can time how long it takes for that reflection to return.
And that time gives them the distance. They can say the break is 1,347 kilometers from this station.
That's incredible. It narrows the search from an entire ocean down to a very specific spot along the known route of the cable.
It narrows it down enough to send the ship.
So then the real work begins.
Then the heavy lifting starts.
What does a repair actually look like on a moving ship? I'm picturing something chaotic.
It's incredibly methodical. It's a 247 operation with a highly specialized crew on a cable repair ship.
First, they have to get there.
Right, which could take days. Once they're over the estimated fault location, they have to retrieve the cable from the seabed.
Which is miles down.
Miles down. They lower a special hook called a grapnel.
A grapnel. A grappling hook.
A very large, very heavy grappling hook. And they drag it across the seabed until it snags the cable.
That sounds imprecise.
It is, but it's what works. Once it's hooked, they begin the slow, careful process of lifting it to the surface.
Hauling this heavy, armored cable up from the deep.
It can take many, many hours. Once it's on deck, they secure it. Then they cut it.
And they have to find both ends of the break, right?
Yes, they'll often bring up a long loop, test back to the shore stations from each side to pinpoint the exact damaged section, and then cut that section out.
And the ship carries spare cable.
Always. They carry sections of all different armor types. They'll cut a replacement length and prepare it.
And then comes the most delicate part.
The splice. Joining those microscopic glass fibers together.
How do they do that on a ship that's, pitching and rolling?
It's done inside a special dedicated clean room on the ship. It has to be a totally controlled, dust-free environment. Technicians use a high-powered microscope and a fusion splicer, which perfectly aligns the fibers and melts them together with an electric arc.
So a high-tech clean room operation happening in the middle of the ocean.
That's the reality of it. After the fibers are joined, they have to meticulously rebuild all the protective layers.
The water-blocking gel, the steel strength members, the outer armor.
Every single layer has to be perfectly restored to ensure the repair will last for years.
And then they test it.
They test it exhaustively, end to end with the shore stations to make sure the signal quality is perfect. Then, and only then, do they carefully lower the repaired section back to the seabed.
And if it's in that shallow danger zone, they might have to rebury it.
Yep, they'll use an ROV to do that.
That whole process sounds like it takes a long time.
The splice itself might only take a few hours. The rest of it, that's what takes the time.
The logistics.
The logistics dominate the timeline. Just getting the ship to the site, waiting for a good weather window to safely lift the cable.
And I imagine depth plays a big role.
Depth, seabed conditions, and permits. If the break is in a country's territorial waters, you need permission to work there, and that can sometimes involve diplomacy.
So a repair could take a week or a month.
Or longer. It really depends on all those variables.
So while all this is happening, the internet isn't down, right? People talk about these doomsday scenarios of a total internet shutdown.
That's extremely rare because of that redundancy we talked about. The internet mostly just degrades.
It finds another way.
The routing protocols on the internet are designed to be self-healing. As soon as a path goes down, routers all over the world learn about it, and they stop sending traffic that way.
And the traffic shifts to the backup cable.
It shifts to whatever alternate paths are available based on commercial agreements between networks. It's not always the shortest path, it's the contracted path.
If everything reroutes, why does it still feel slow sometimes? Why do I get buffering on my video?
Because those backup paths weren't designed to carry all the traffic from the main path. They have a certain amount of spare capacity, but if a major cable fails, that spare capacity can get overwhelmed very quickly.
So it's a traffic jam.
It's a digital traffic jam. You get congestion, which means higher latency, packet loss, which to you just feels like your connection is slow and unreliable.
And the impact is worst in those regions that have fewer alternate routes.
Exactly. That uneven resilience. A cable cut in the Atlantic might cause some congestion. A cable cut serving a small island nation could cripple its connectivity.
This brings us to the geography of risk, the idea of choke point.
Yes, this is a huge issue in global network planning.
What defines a choke point?
It's a narrow geographical corridor where a whole bunch of these critical subsea cables are forced to cluster together.
Either because the geography funnels them like a narrow strait,
or because it's the most direct pass between major economic centers. But that clustering creates a massive shared risk. A single event in a choke point can damage multiple, supposedly independent systems at the same time.
Can you give us some examples? Where are these critical spots?
The classic example is the route between Europe and Asia. Almost all of that traffic has to pass through the Red Sea and a very narrow strait called the Bab el-Mandeb.
A huge portion of the world's data is flowing through that one narrow body of water.
A massive portion. Any disruption there, accidental or otherwise, has huge global consequences.
Where else?
The Strait of Malacca, around Singapore, it's one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world, and also one of the densest digital hubs.
A recipe for anchor strikes.
A very high-risk area. Then you have places like the Strait of Gibraltar or the Mediterranean Sea in general, where you have dozens of cables connecting Europe, Africa, and the Middle East, all crammed into a relatively small, shallow sea.
And even somewhere like the English Channel.
The English Channel is a constant source of anxiety for operators. It's shallow, it's crowded with ships. It's a prime location for faults.
So when we hear about these faults, there's always talk about security, about deliberate attacks. How real is that threat?
The threat model is complex. Deliberate interference is a genuine concern for governments and operators.
Right.
But the vast majority of disruptions are still accidental. They're happening near the shore, caused by ships and fishing boats.
So a deliberate attack, where is that most likely to happen?
It's far more plausible in those same accessible coastal zones than it is in the deep ocean.
Why is that?
A deep ocean operation would require very specialized equipment, like a military submarine or custom submersible. It's expensive, it's difficult, and it's hard to do without being noticed. Tampering with a cable in shallower water is, relatively speaking, much easier.
So the practical security efforts aren't really focused on deep-sea submarine warfare?
Not primarily. They're focused on protecting the physical landing stations on shore, on burying and monitoring the cables in those high-risk nearshore areas, and above all, on building more route diversity.
More redundancy.
More redundancy. Because at the end of the day, the best defense against a cable cut is having another cable to take the load. The world changes. Quietly. One invisible cable at a time.
Looking ahead, where is the technology going? We always need more bandwidth.
The demand is insatiable. So the technology is evolving on a few fronts.
Okay.
First, just putting more fiber pairs in a single cable. Early cables had maybe 4 or 6 pairs. Now we're seeing designs with 16, 24, even more.
So double the fibers, you double the capacity.
More or less. Second, they're squeezing more out of each fiber by packing more wavelengths, more colors, onto them with more advanced WDM systems.
And the third wave.
More efficient signaling. Better ways of encoding the ones and zeros into the light pulses so you can fit more data into the same amount of light. That's more of a software and electronics improvement.
And what about on the resilience side? Are operators trying to avoid these choke points?
They are. There's a huge push now for route diversification, actively planning new cables that avoid the Red Sea, for instance, or that take entirely new paths, even if they're longer or more difficult.
Like going around Africa instead of through the Suez Canal.
Exactly. Or building new Arctic routes. It's all about not putting all your eggs in one geographic basket.
When you step back from it all, it really is amazing. Our entire global, digital, modern life.
From your bank transfer to your Netflix stream.
It all depends on this silent, invisible, and surprisingly fragile network sitting in the cold, dark water.
We never think about it until it breaks.
Most of modern life runs on things we never look at. Which I guess brings us to a final provocative thought for you to consider.
Okay.
We've established that the most common cause of damage is accidental human activity in shallow water. Anchors and fishing nets.
Right. The low-tech problems.
So, given the immense high-tech complexity of laying and repairing these cables, what practical low-tech solution could actually have the biggest impact on global internet stability?
That's a great question. It's that contrast, isn't it? The elegance of photonics versus the brute force of a ship's anchor.
So what's the low-tech fix?
It's probably not a better cable. It's probably better information. Mandatory, real-time, high-accuracy digital seabed maps in the navigation systems of every single large commercial vessel.
So the captain always knows exactly where the cables are.
And an alarm goes off if they're about to drop anchor on one. It's a regulatory and data sharing problem, not a deep-sea engineering problem. A simple solution to the most common problem.
Thanks for listening to Brain Binge. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe, and let us know what you'd like us to cover next.